Episode 74, Law, Lies, and Flight, How Brigham Young Fled Illinois. Welcome to the Hidden and Distorted History of the Church series, where we will be looking at the historical aspects of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormons. In this series, I will try and inform those unaware of the true facts of Mormon history. Recap. Last week, Porter Rockwell gunned down Carthage militia leader Franklin Worrell. Brigham Young vowed to lead the Saints to Oregon or Vancouver Island. Lucy Mack Smith became the first woman to speak at General Conference. A Hancock grand jury indicted Brigham Young for counterfeiting, prompting a secret meeting of the 12. This week, Brigham Young and other church leaders face federal indictments for counterfeiting, prompting a clever escape stunt involving William Miller. Samuel Brannan warns Young that the U.S. government plans to disarm the Saints with troops stationed near Nauvoo, accelerating the decision to leave. The secretive Council of 50 meets to finalize plans for what becomes the Great Mormon Migration. Meanwhile, Zina Jacobs Smith marries Brigham Young for life, but remains sealed to Joseph Smith for eternity, illustrating early complex sealing practices. The Nauvoo Temple closes as tensions peak, and on February 15th, Brigham Young leads the first group out of Nauvoo into Iowa Territory. You do not want to miss this episode. Part 1. The law closes in on Brigham Young. On December 18, 1845, a federal grand jury in Springfield, Illinois, indicted Brigham Young, Willard Richards, John Taylor, Parley P. Pratt, Orson Hyde, Theodore Turley, and several others, both Mormon and non-Mormon, for alleged counterfeiting activities in Nauvoo. Newspapers of the time reported that Nauvoo had become a center for counterfeit U.S. and Mexican coins, with claims that wagon loads of bogus currency were being circulated and even used to purchase land. Theodore Turley was singled out as having set up a press in Nauvoo to manufacture counterfeit bills, while earlier that year Warren Snow and Dominicus Carter had been jailed in Quincy for passing forged money, strengthening suspicions of a larger organized effort within the community. When federal marshals arrived in Nauvoo to arrest Brigham Young, he orchestrated one of the most talked-about ruses of the time. Young sent William Miller, dressed in his cloak and wearing his distinctive hat, to stand in plain sight, knowing the marshals were watching. The marshals, believing they had caught Young, arrested Miller, only to discover their mistake when it was too late. This episode quickly made its way into local papers such as the Sangamo Journal and the Warsaw Signal, which reported the incident with a mix of humor and scorn, often portraying it as both a clever escape and a humiliation for federal authorities. For critics of the church, the story was further proof of Mormon cunning and defiance of the law, while for supporters, it became a tale of quick wit and divine favor, protecting their leader. The indictments and the sensational press coverage of the Miller incident heightened anti-Mormon sentiment throughout Illinois. Rumors of widespread lawlessness in Nauvoo, whether true or exaggerated, were eagerly consumed by a public already distrustful of the Mormon leadership following the death of Joseph Smith and the growing political and economic power of the church. These developments, combined with escalating threats of violence and the fear of federal troops being sent to enforce the law, convinced Brigham Young and his fellow leaders to accelerate plans for leaving Illinois. By February 1846, just weeks after the Miller incident had made headlines, the first groups of Latter-day Saints began their westward migration in harsh winter conditions, determined to escape both prosecution and public hostility. On January 12, 1846, Samuel Brannan, who was leading a group of Mormon emigrants aboard the ship Brooklyn bound for California, wrote to Brigham Young with a warning that the U.S. government was preparing to deploy a large military force. Brannan expressed concern that this militant force was intent on disarming the Latter-day Saints in the spring as they fled Illinois, reflecting fears that the federal authorities saw the armed Mormon population as a potential threat. A follow-up letter on January 29th reiterated that troops would be stationed west of Nauvoo with orders to confiscate Mormon firearms. These communications reached Young during a critical time when church leaders were meeting in the Council of 50 to finalize plans for their westward migration. The warnings from Brannan, though he was geographically distant in California, significantly influenced church leadership, accelerating their decision to begin the exodus earlier than originally intended. Brannan's role as an intelligence conduit helped shape the narrative that the government planned to forcibly disarm and suppress Mormon self-defense, making a preemptive departure appear the only viable option. However, some historians have questioned the accuracy of Brannan's reports, suggesting that his warnings may have reflected a combination of genuine concern and personal motives, political, financial, or otherwise. Despite this, the perceived threat of military intervention and disarmament, heightened by Brannan's letters, fed into the already tense atmosphere following the 1845 indictments and growing hostility in Illinois. This created a sense of urgency among the Mormon leadership to leave Nauvoo before federal troops could act. Thus, Brannan's warnings played a pivotal role in the timing and nature of the Mormon exodus, illustrating how perceived threats, whether fully accurate or exaggerated, can shape critical decisions in moments of crisis. Part 2. An urgency to push west. Between January 11 and 19, 1846, the Council of 50, a secretive political and religious leadership body headed by Brigham Young, convened in Nauvoo to finalize plans for the impending departure of the Latter-day Saints. The council's focus was on logistics, route selection, and timing, with the aim of executing an expedited and coordinated migration. This planning responded directly to multiple pressures: legal indictments against church leaders, rising hostility from local non-Mormons, and credible intelligence about federal military intentions to disarm the Mormon population. These deliberations marked a decisive shift from maintaining the Nauvoo settlement toward organizing what would become known as the Great Mormon Migration. The Council's decisions laid the operational foundation for this mass exodus, reflecting a strategic move to preserve the Church's autonomy and survival amid escalating conflict. On January 29, 1846, Samuel Brannan sent a second letter to Brigham Young, warning that the U.S. government intended to station troops west of Nauvoo with orders to disarm the Mormon population. This intelligence significantly increased the pressure on the Church leadership to act. Dallin H. Oakes, a current high-ranking leader and general authority of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, later wrote that this warning appears to have been decisive in persuading the Mormon leaders to begin their departure. Confronted with the prospect of federal military enforcement and forced disarmament, Brigham Young and the Council of 50 quickly finalized plans for the Mormon exodus from Illinois to the west. The marriage of Zina Jacobs Smith to Brigham Young on February 2, 1846, is significant because it illustrates the complex and evolving nature of early Mormon marriage and sealing practices. At that time, Zina was already sealed for eternity to Joseph Smith, the Church's founder, but she entered into a civil marriage with Young for time. That is, a marriage intended to last only during her mortal life. The Church considered her prior civil marriage effectively canceled or superseded by these spiritual sealings, although no formal civil divorce was ever recorded. This dual arrangement reflected early Latter-day Saint beliefs about the eternal nature of marriage and the distinction between civil and spiritual unions. In today's mainstream LDS theology, a woman can be sealed to only one man for eternity, emphasizing the exclusivity and permanence of eternal marriage covenants. The practice of being sealed to multiple men, common in the 19th century during the era of plural marriage and complex sealing doctrines, has been discontinued and is not accepted in the modern Church. Zina Jacobs Smith's case highlights how early Mormon marriage doctrines were fluid and experimental, contrasting sharply with the stricter sealing policies and theological interpretations that govern Latter-day Saint marriage today. Part 3. The start of the end for Nauvoo. Between January 11 and 19, 1846, the Council of 50 met in Nauvoo to finalize detailed plans for the Latter-day Saints' departure from Illinois. The council focused on logistics, route selection, and timing to carry out an organized migration. These meetings marked a transition from attempting to maintain control over Nauvoo to launching what became known as the Great Mormon Migration. The Council of 50's decisions established the framework for this large-scale exodus, which was as much a political and military retreat as it was a migration, undertaken amid open hostilities and legal challenges. In February 1846, the Nauvoo Temple was officially closed as the Latter-day Saints prepared to abandon the city. The temple, which had been a central religious and cultural symbol for the community, ceased operations amid growing tensions, legal pressures, and the escalating exodus known as the Great Mormon Migration. Its closure marked a tangible end to the Saints' attempts to maintain their presence in Nauvoo and underscored the irreversible shift from settlement to mass migration. The temple would remain unfinished and unused for many years, symbolizing the collapse of the Mormon experiment in Illinois. On February 15, 1846, Brigham Young departed Nauvoo with his family, heading into the Iowa Territory. This marked a critical moment in the Great Mormon Migration, as Young, the church's leading figure after Joseph Smith's death, took the first major step in leading the Latter-day Saints away from Illinois amid mounting legal troubles, violent conflicts, and increasing federal pressure. His departure signaled the irreversible collapse of the Nauvoo settlement and the beginning of the long and difficult trek westward in search of a new homeland. I hope you learned something new. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and follow for more no-fluff, ex-Mormon content that cuts through the faith-promoting fog. Please watch for future videos, and thank you so kindly for watching. This is the Ex-Mormon Informant signing off for the day.